back in the city from which they were taken, rather than in the prison where they are held. The Census Bureau has at times counted Americans abroad. But today, if you're an American abroad and you maintain your domicile in the United States and you're voting in the United States and you vote in the United States, unless you're in the military or you work for a federal agency, you are not counted in the census, even though you're voting in that district. And the Census Bureau has changed its mind on these things over time. The Census Bureau has changed its mind on how you count students. The Census Bureau changes its mind by its own decision without regard, not only to Congress, but without regard to the definitions in the Constitution. So whether or not we win or lose this case, we think it is an important issue that the Census Bureau is not an elected body. It should not be allocating and deciding how major representation is affected in this country. So the third point has to do with the consequences. I mentioned that if you are an out-of-state student and your family counts you at home, the Census Bureau follows up with verification. But that's about the only place they follow up with verification. They've admitted that they have no way of verifying the information. So normally they mail to most people, to a household, and you get the form, and you're supposed to fill it out and send it in, and about 60 to 70% of people do. And then they call the rest or send out census workers to the others. But in some places they do it differently. There was a lot of political pressure in New Orleans because it's going to be hit hard as a result of the loss of population after Katrina. And the mayor of New Orleans, former mayor, wanted everybody who used to live in New Orleans counted back in New Orleans. Census Bureau wouldn't go that far, but they set it up in such a way that they put Census Bureau forms on all these vacant houses throughout the New Orleans area. Now, if you know anything about New Orleans political corruption, you know that that was a situation ripe with possibilities. Not only do they not count verify, I've already told you what they do regarding students. By the way, this is not a state school, but you might want to mention it to those who attend state school in an out-of-state place. The reason why it is said that states get to charge differential tuitions for out-of-state students is because, after all, students who live there in that state, they're contributing by taxes. Well, guess what? The real issue regarding the count of students, and it's driven heavily by universities, and some of the universities have been very, very insistent on this, is that each student is worth a lot of money. That is, each year there is $400 billion allocated by the census. Now, there are 435 congressional seats, so that's almost $1 billion a district. You divide that by the number of people in a district, which this year is about 750,000 persons, you know, that mounts up. Students are valuable commodities as far as cities and the Census Bureau are concerned. Because for most people, the constitutional issue is not terribly important. But the money issue, that is really important. And you can see what's happened is that the exact thing the framers intended to guard against, that is the incentives to inflate your numbers. The census system right now actually guarantees a tremendous push to inflate your numbers regardless of the politics, because it's all about money. That's a major consequence in this whole thing. Now, what are the political consequences? Well, if you count, as the Census Bureau counts, this time each district will have to have roughly 750,000 people. If you count the way we think you should count, then each district would have 650,000 people. That's a significant difference. But moreover, it's not an evenly spread thing. I said there were 22 million people who are not citizens, and the bulk of those persons should not be, in our view, counted for persons or purposes of reapportionment. But those numbers are not evenly spread across the country. So if you are looking at those who are in the foreign visitors in the country who don't fall into the immigrant status, where are those numbers? Well, it's very obvious. California, Arizona, Colorado, Texas, Florida, New York even. New York would probably, without this count, would probably lose another seat. It's interesting to look at it because what happens is that in certain districts, those running for Congress actually have to appeal to fewer voters. Because all of these numbers, regardless of citizenship or immigrant status, are included in a district. But unless you're a citizen, you can't vote. So a district in California, a district in Florida, a district in Texas may well, in fact, have fewer voters. Now, there was a famous U.S. Supreme Court case that started all of this reapportionment business out called the Westbury case. And after our op-ed appeared in the Wall Street Journal, Mr. Westbury wrote us, and he was infuriated about how the system was distorting his landmark case. Because in the landmark decision of the Supreme Court, it says that the districts have to have equal voters. We don't have equal numbers of voters in the districts around the country as a result of this system. Is it likely that Congress will do anything about it? No, this is a difficult question. Political question. You would think that, at least for political purposes, that some people would realize that their state is getting shortchanged not only on money but on representation. It's a mixed bag because in some places Republicans are doing well by these inflated numbers, and in other places Democrats are doing well. So California benefits, but on the other hand, big Republican states like Texas and Florida increase their representation and therefore increase the number of electoral votes. Republicans don't want to touch this issue by and large for their own reasons. A lot of it has to do with concern about appearing to be anti-Hispanic. And it may have to do with the fact that they've run the numbers and figure out that maybe they do better electorally. But I don't understand why a state like Pennsylvania, which is really being hurt, and a state like Ohio, which is really being hurt, which Ohio was a blue state until this last election, and Pennsylvania continues to be basically a blue state. Why their representatives would not want to make sure that they maximize the benefit for their own states. I don't know why, but I can tell you, having tried to work this issue with political figures, that they are most reluctant to deal with this. The issue then, as it should in part, fall to the courts because, as we framed it, it is not a political issue. It is a pure constitutional issue of what is the text, the context, and what meaning should be given to that, and how should the Census Bureau govern itself when it reapportions. Thank you, and I'll